Hi, I'm Kathy Hedge, the Executive Director of the Parent Encouragement Program, better known as PEP. Today's focus is on supporting children's mental health. It's not an easy topic, but it's a really important one. Dr. Dominique Folks, Medical Director and Chair of Pediatrics at Suburban Hospital Johns Hopkins Medicine, will join Ashna for a conversation about what we need to know to support our children's mental health. Dr. Folks works on the front lines of mental health care and has some really valuable insights and guidance to share with us. So let's get started.
Mental health issues are on the rise, and families should understand that it's not just you or your child experiencing difficulties with stress, anxiety, and depression. Dr. Folks, can you tell us more about the common causes of child anxiety and depression?
So, the common causes of stress for childhood anxiety and depression really depend on the age of the child. So, for school-age children, that's children between the age of, let's say, 5 and 12, many of the causes of stress really revolve around things going on in the home. Maybe if there's parental job loss or parental separation, those can be huge sources of stress in children that age. In addition to that, there are some school-related causes of stress. So bullying, whether or not the kids are getting along with their peers and their teachers, those can be stressors in that age group. For older kids and adolescents, there's a huge reliance on their peer group. And peer influences at that age can be positive and affirming, or can be negative and a huge source of stress in that age group. And in this day and age, for adolescents, that peer pressure, whether it's negative or positive, it's almost constant now with the ubiquitous use of social media. So those are huge stressors. Another stressor in that age group is the pressure to perform academically. Many kids at that point are trying to, really thinking about their future and making sure that they're setting themselves up to do well in the future. So that can be stressful for them. One particular source of stress in teens today is when they're questioning their gender identity and sexual orientation. And this is a huge source of anxiety because they're worried about peer acceptance, parental acceptance, and even whether or not there's their larger community acceptance.
We know that some stress is considered normal. Can you give us a real-life example of what a normal stress level looks like?
So a normal stress level is a positive energy that allows us all to work to achieve our goals. For teens and adolescents, that positive stress energy will drive them to work to prepare for a piano recital or a big athletic event, and even to keep them motivated to study for an exam when they prefer to be outside hanging out with their friends. And the physical feelings of that can sometimes be uncomfortable, but that energy drives them to achieve their goals. And once the event has passed or the exam is done, the recital is over, then those physical feelings go away. So when those physical symptoms are sustained and persistent, even after the stressful event has passed, those are signs of negative stress. And some of the physical manifestations of that parents might notice would be if their child is not sleeping well. Either they're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. Sometimes kids who experience a lot of negative stress also have some physical complaints, such as headache or abdominal pain, that don't really have a clear medical reason. Those are all concerning signs of negative stress.
What should parents and other caregivers look out for so that they know when their child needs help from a professional?
That's a great question because with adolescents, it can be very difficult to tell. They're normally and developmentally kind of moody and hormonal, so it can be hard to tell which behaviors are just a normal part of that development and those that are a cause for concern. But I would advise parents that if there's a significant change in how a child is behaving and relating to their family, then they should seek medical help. So, for instance, if a previously very amenable and easygoing child is now very obstinate, they're arguing with parents and even siblings all the time, that can be a concerning sign. Another concerning sign is if a child who had previously been very outgoing and never missed a party or a chance to hang out with their friends now never wants to leave the house. Those are signs that you may need to seek some professional help. And certainly, if your child is expressing any sense of hopelessness or what's the point of living, or expressing any thoughts of self-harm, then those are reasons to seek professional help.
What about physical changes?
If they're, having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, that can be a concerning physical sign. Another concerning physical sign is any significant change in their appetite. So if they're eating way more than they used to and even gaining lots of weight, or eating less than they usually did and maybe losing weight, those can be physical signs of an underlying mental health problem.
Can you tell us how symptoms of depression are different from symptoms of stress and anxiety?
So often, depression and anxiety can happen together almost at the same time. However, the symptoms are very different. So with depression, kids are often very sad. That's one of the main features. And that sadness can cause them to have low mood and low energy. Often kids will have sadness from time to time, but it's abnormal when it lasts for weeks or months or goes on for a very long time. Those feelings of sadness, that low energy and mood, can often cause kids to feel just hopeless about life. That hopeless feeling can sometimes then lead to thoughts of suicide or wanting to harm themselves or thinking a lot about death. So the symptoms with anxiety are both physical and emotional. So the physical symptoms are when kids have those stress feelings for a very long period of time. So they're having that uncomfortable heart racing or sweaty palms or fast breathing. That can be a sign of positive stress, but it's lasting for a very long time. Some of the other symptoms are an unusual worry or nervousness or dread over situations that may not call for it. For instance, interacting with other children or going to school now cause a lot of feelings of fear and nervousness. Those can be signs of anxiety.
What are some ways we can talk to our kids about how they're feeling, especially if we suspect that they're dealing with serious mental health issues?
So the first thing I want to advise parents to do is actually to talk openly about feelings around mental health, even when their kids are doing okay. Just make it a normal part of the things that you talk about with your child. That way, when a child or a teen is having really very negative feelings, they're ready to come and talk with you. And at that point, don't panic. There's help. And you've already set the stage for that open dialogue and conversation. So if your child doesn't willingly come to you, but you notice something, then I would just approach them gently and with empathy and say, hey, I noticed that something seems different with you or something seems a little bit off with you. And I know that, there have been times that I've definitely felt this way and I've been in a dark place. And, sometimes when people feel this way, they have thoughts of hurting themselves. Is that something you're feeling? If so, I want you to know that you're always welcome to come and talk with me, or we can find someone for you to talk to.
And of course, this isn't something you talk about once and then it's magically easier. It's something that parents need to bring up again and again until everyone in the family feels comfortable with the topic. Can you talk more about that? The phrasing is so important, and as parents, we tend to talk off the cuff and maybe not measure our words carefully enough in delicate situations like this.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to cover importantly, one of the things that parents should not say, and that is, I know how you feel. And as a parent myself, I can tell you that we really don't. So we shouldn't say that. Our experience growing up decades ago is completely different. The challenges that our kids are facing are much different than the ones that we faced as teens and adolescents. The second phrase that every parent should avoid saying is that it's not a big deal. You don't want to minimize in any way what your child is feeling. You may think it's not a big deal, but for them, it's very important. And when we do that, we actually run the risk of kind of closing down the lines of communication that we really want to keep open.
Okay, so now we know to not say, I know how you feel and it's no big deal. So what should a parent say?
Well, one of the things I encourage parents to do is when your child comes to you and they're talking about difficult emotions, is to try to name and identify what it is that they've said to you. And that does two things. It helps them to know that you are really listening to them. And it also helps to clarify things because you might say, well, it sounds like you're really angry. And they might say, well, Mom or Dad, I'm actually feeling very sad. The other thing is you want to affirm or validate what they're feeling. And that will take away some of the fear and the stigma. So you want to say something like, it's not uncommon for people to feel this way, or these are things that a lot of kids your age struggle with.
Some parents might not know how to start that conversation. It might be something they didn't grow up talking about. Maybe they feel some stigma from their own experiences. What are some ways to break the ice about mental health talk?
So one way we can break the ice is by kind of talking about other people that might be having mental health issues. And that way, a child may not feel like defensive or worried, and you could either bring up, there are lots of professional athletes or even actors and musicians who have been open about their struggles with mental health. Another thing that you could say is that, is there a friend in your peer group or at school that you're concerned might be having depression or thoughts of harming themselves? And those are good ways to open the conversation.
Those are great ideas, Dr. Folks. Tell us some more.
Parents should know that when their child is depressed or anxious, they should not feel like it's their fault. As a parent myself, we invest so much time and effort into our children that, we tend to feel like if they're struggling with something, it's a failure on our part. The focus instead should be on just staying connected with your child and offering them your continued support and knowing that there's help for both your child and yourself.
So we just learned how to recognize warning signs of mental health struggles in our kids and how to respond to them. One of the big takeaways I heard is how important it is for us parents to get comfortable talking about feelings and emotions to our boys and to our girls so that we make it normal to talk about mental health at home. Now let's go back to our conversation with Ashna and Dr. Folks to hear about treatment and prevention.
I want to ask you about the different ways to treat depression and anxiety.
So once a teen or a child has been evaluated by a professional and they have a diagnosis of depression and anxiety, the good news is that there is effective and safe treatment. There are several FDA-approved medications for both anxiety and depression in children. Currently, we know that the best way to treat anxiety and depression is a combination of both medication and psychotherapy or talk therapy.
We've heard a lot of kids complain about having to go to therapy or they think that it's not working. How do you respond to kids who say that?
Yeah, I hear that complaint often. And one thing I would encourage parents to do is that sometimes their kid is really just not connecting with that therapist or they don't have a sense of trust. And you might have to find another therapist in that instance. The same thing with the medication. Sometimes the first medication that they're on may not be the right one, or there may need to be adjustments to the dose over time. So, be patient. It's kind of analogous to, if a kid breaks their arm, they're in a cast for 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. That can be uncomfortable and itching, and they can't shower and they can't play their sports, but that's what they need for their broken bone to heal. And it's the same with therapy and medication. It takes time both to find the right fit with their therapist and also with the medication.
I know there is still a stigma around mental health. Many parents are reluctant to look into mental health treatment for themselves or their kids. How do you respond to that?
I would recommend that parents not downplay if their child is having a mental health problem, because first of all, we know when we intervene early, in general, that leads to better outcomes. And the second is, if we ignore the problem, then sometimes kids turn to ways to self-medicate to help them feel better by using drugs and alcohol.
Do you have advice for parents on what they can say to encourage their child to seek treatment?
Yes, this is a common challenge. And the first, if a patient or a child is reluctant to getting therapy in particular, I would advise parents to try to figure out the reason why. Are they just, feeling hopeless that anything's going to help them? Sometimes they're embarrassed or afraid. They may even feel like there's nothing wrong with them and they don't need the help. In those instances, it might be helpful to have them think about therapy differently. So have them think about it as going to a coach. Every athlete, even professional ones, need a coach to help them develop new skills and strategies. And this is the same thing that a therapist would do. The other thing that might be helpful is for the family to get therapy, depending on what the problem is, and that way that the child does not feel singled out. For adolescents who are, wanting to exert more control and independence in their lives, it might be helpful to have them involved in the process of finding a therapist.
The one thing we haven't talked about yet is prevention. What are some prevention tips?
As a pediatrician, prevention is near and dear to my heart. So the 3 things that I would advise parents to focus on are in the realms of sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Let's start with sleep. All children, even teenagers, need proper sleep to grow, for their brains to develop, and so that they have a proper and healthy mental outlook to face any challenges. Next, let's talk about exercise. Numerous studies have shown the importance of exercise in preventing depression and anxiety. So these don't have to be complicated things, just daily movement, whether it's walking the dog or mowing the lawn or having a friendly game of basketball outside with their friends. Those things are very helpful. The last is nutrition. Try to avoid highly processed foods. So anything that you get in the inner aisles of the grocery store. So highly processed things, sugary drinks. Try instead to have your child eat lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and this will support their mental health.
Yes, I find that keeping healthy foods around is the only way to keep my kids from eating cake, cookies, and chips all day. So we covered sleep, movement, and nourishment. What about ongoing support?
Support is so important. Parents should let their kids know that even if they're not comfortable coming to them all the time with an issue or a concern, that they should feel comfortable reaching out to another trusted adult, whether it's a teacher, a counselor at school, an athletic coach, or even the parent of a friend. It's important to have that network. We know that it takes a village to raise a child.